Hi friends, Ashley from Wildwoods&Homestead. I brought you guys along for a clean house day, so I hope you enjoy. And I'm going to start with a Chaga kombucha. This is a chore that I do once a week. I brew about 2 gallons of kombucha a week, although as we head into summer and we get those nice warm temperatures for fermenting, I'm hoping to up it to about 4 gallons at a time. But more specifically on this day, I was actually making a chaga kombucha, and I'll explain the benefits of chaga in just a moment if you are not familiar with chaga. But first, I'm just going to quickly share how I do my chaga kombucha. The night before, I will bring about a gallon of water to boil in a pot, and then I will add 1/3 of a cup of chaga to that, allow it to sit and cool overnight. That's what I had in that jar that I was stirring. Then the next day I will stir in 1.5 cups of sugar, and then throughout the day I'm just going to stir that until it all dissolves. And I will get back to that chaga toward the end of the day, as I am going to pour the finished kombucha for our meal, and I'll share that. And then I'm going to pour my steeped chaga into the jar with the SCOBY so that I'm fermenting more kombucha. So that's a chore that if I haven't been able to do it throughout the week, I will catch up with that on Fridays for our clean house day. So I'm just bathing my little baby right here. She has started eating solid foods, a lot of yogurt and butter and some diced up hamburger, some shredded hard cheeses. But yeah, she gets it all over her. So this is becoming a daily thing at pretty much each meal, where I just take her right over to the sink. So while I'm bathing her, I'm just going to briefly talk about what chaga is in case you're not familiar with it. It's a fungus that grows on the side of dying birch trees, and it is full of nutrients. More specifically, it contains something called beta-glucan, which kills cancer cells and boosts the immune system. And I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer about 10 years ago. So I was trying to find all of the anti-cancer things that I could add into our diet. And when I discovered chaga, I wanted to see if I could add that into our diet in some creative ways, which brought me to kombucha. And you can make kombucha with any tea that has tannins in it, because I guess it's the tannins that ferment, and chaga does happen to have tannins in it. So that's how I discovered that. And then, of course, whenever you're fermenting something, what I have read is that it actually increases the nutrients in whatever it is that you're fermenting. Plus, I just really love having this bubbly, gut healthy, full of probiotics and enzymes drink throughout the week with our meals. So I'm hoping to get better at that and start getting more kombucha brewing this summer so that we can have it more often. We will drink that instead of something carbonated or like soda, or we used to actually get those stevia bubbly drinks, but we weren't really feeling that well after drinking those. So that is one of the chores that I will catch up on our Fridays. Laundry, typically, I'll admit, laundry has not been my chore in so long. Geoff and the kids have actually been doing their own laundry. And also with dishes and the house and the floor. Basically, what we will do on Friday is pay attention to all of those things that we can't get to throughout the week. We don't do school. I try not to make any product. I do I'll clean the toilets or the windows if they need it. Those are some of my chores. Or I like to boil, I don't know, does anybody do this? I like to boil water and then pour it down my sinks just to clean out those drains. So all of those little things that I can't get to throughout the week, I do on this day. And on this day, I ended up heading also out to the greenhouse to get a few things done out there. And I brought my camera out to show a little bit of an update of the greenhouse as we head from winter to spring. We have had some really warm temperatures and we have all of this snow melting, and the greenhouse is super wet, which isn't actually a good thing, but I will get to that in a moment. I am sharing a couple of experiments I have out here, and one is this worm farm. This is our old bathtub. It broke a couple of years ago. I have delivered 2 children in this bathtub, and when it broke, I just didn't want to throw it out. So Geoff turned it into a worm farm. So what I do is I throw our kitchen scraps on the left-hand side, and then the worms and their bedding are on the right-hand side. Once this left-hand side is all full, we're going to take the right hand side, that soil with all the worms in it, and gently turn it over onto the fresh scraps, and then I'll start over on the other side. But I'm just showing these little tomato starts that I have in there, these little volunteer tomato starts. So I'm going to take those and as they grow, repot them, and then I will put those out into the garden eventually. So I'm waiting for those to get a little bit bigger before I start turning that worm farm. So when we built this greenhouse, we trenched in some perforated pipes, and then we placed mesh fabric around those pipes so that they wouldn't get all clogged. All of that takes all of the excess water on the floor of the greenhouse and drains it to the other end of the greenhouse to a sump pump. That sump pump was completely full on this day. You can see the water coming up through the rocks. So the floor of the greenhouse, once we covered those pipes, we've got the clay and the dirt, and then we put down a fabric, landscape fabric, and then the pea gravel. I did not want to do landscape fabric, but unfortunately, if we had just put the pea gravel, we would have eventually just lost it into the earth, because that's just kind of what things do here. They just sink down into the earth, even though we have clay, which is really odd. So that's the floor of the greenhouse, and here's this sump pump over there. I just showed that it is completely full. Typically, we'll take that, we'll pump it out. But because water is such an issue for us, we don't have any rain catches. We don't have a dugout, which is just basically a big hole in the ground that catches rain, and that's what a lot of people will build here for their livestock and their gardens. We don't have that yet. That is something we're going to do. But in the meantime, I'm trying to save as much water as I can while we have all of this snow melting. So what I'm doing, instead of watering all of the beds because they are quite damp right now, is I had a pump down in the sump pump there. I'm turning it on and I'm siphoning it all into that big container that I showed, that big round container, and I just filled all of that up. And then whatever was left, because there was a ton of water out there, Geoff just pumped out of the greenhouse. And I would like to find a better way to utilize that. We're thinking about maybe planting some strawberries outside behind the greenhouse, and then that way all of the water that floods the greenhouse can just be pumped out into that strawberry bed, because like I said, water is such an issue for us. Our well is high sodium. We have a great well. We've got tons of water. But if we want to drink it or we want to put it on the garden, we have to run it through a reverse osmosis system, which isn't the best, because I think for every gallon of water that you actually get out of the filter, it throws like 10 gallons out. I can't remember that, but it's not a long-term solution. Okay, so this lettuce bed leads me to grow lights. I couldn't get anything to germinate just because of the angle of the greenhouse and the way that the sun tracks across the sky. It's like further away the way that it tracks from behind the greenhouse. So nothing was germinating. So what I'm finding is that if I want to germinate anything in the winter, we have to put out a grow light. So I used that grow light there to see how it would work with the lettuce, and it worked really well, but it's not something I want to do. Instead, I would rather just learn the best time to plant in the summer so that all of my little seedlings can germinate and then grow and be well established before we head into winter. With the greenhouse being so damp right now, I unfortunately have a huge aphid infestation. So, what I'm also learning is how to keep the greenhouse a nice temperature for growing, but also find that happy medium between too wet and then also being dry enough so that I don't have these issues. And that leads me to this fan right here. So that was what Geoff was doing. He was fixing those louvers because they were frozen and then he had to fix the motor on them. But when the greenhouse hits a certain temperature, those louvers open and then this fan down here opens and it pulls all of the air out and cools off the greenhouse. Once the greenhouse hits the temperature that we want, the fan shuts off and then the louvers close. So now that we have that back up and running, I'm hoping that I can get my water situation under control and possibly my aphid infestation under control as well. So I wanted to try to find a natural way to deal with those aphids besides learning how to prevent the situation altogether. I don't know if I can always prevent the situation. I have read that buying ladybugs and releasing them into your greenhouse is a way to keep the aphid population down. So I do think I'm going to try that. But besides the water control and placing ladybugs in the greenhouse, I've also tried diatomaceous earth, which is all this powdery stuff here. And I do find that the plants that I spray with that, I'm getting less aphids. And then any parts of the plant where I have a ton of aphids, I will just manually pick off those parts of the plant, cut them, whatever, and then put them out in the snow so that hopefully the aphids die. On this, these are my pepper plants here. Anaheim peppers, I think is what they're called. And I had, I think like just 3 of them. So I went ahead and harvested those for our supper. If this is my first video that you've watched, I will just briefly explain. We purchased our acreage 10 years ago and it was completely treed. We have cleared most of it by hand and we did a self-build mortgage. So we built 80% of the house. And then, of course, all the subsequent buildings we have just built completely on our own. But one of the ways that we clear land is cutting everything down and creating brush piles. And then we will burn those in the winter. And that way we don't risk having a forest fire. When the snow melts, we'll just spread all of that out. And in some places, we will plant fruit trees. In other places, we'll plant gardens. That's how we are also going to plan to prepare the pasture for cows and then plant up that pasture. But basically, that's just how we've been clearing the land so far. A couple years ago, though, we did rent a wood chipper. So I think we'll do that again because wood chips are just something that are really great for the garden. Whenever I bring in lettuce from the greenhouse or just garden produce in general, I try to wash it right away and then get it into the refrigerator because often I have found that I will bring produce in and I'll just be like, okay, I'm going to have this for our meals today. And then I'll just leave it on the counter and I'll completely forget about it, come back to it all wilted. So I've tried to make it a habit that if I'm harvesting just a little bit of produce for that day, for that supper or something like that, I'll just quickly wash it and dry it really well and then put it into a glass container and then put that into the refrigerator. And then by the time I pull it out for supper, it's all nice and crisp and ready for us to use. Since it's our clean house day, I'm just going to mention something really interesting that I have been reading about, and that is about how it's good to not be so clean. This is really hard for me because I have always struggled with germs. I've always been like, I would use hand sanitizer when I was younger and wash my hands a lot and use things like bleach and antibacterial. And then I read a really neat paper on Amish kids and how they actually had less rates of asthma, they had stronger immune systems, and I guess I could apply that. There was another paper I read on kids raised on farms. and that they had healthier immune systems than kids that weren't raised on farms or kids that have an animal in the house. But more recently, I read something about how kids that were raised without a dishwasher had stronger immune systems than kids that were raised with a dishwasher. So I'm trying to be like clean germy. I don't know if that makes any sense. So whenever I'm done, if I'm just washing lettuce or something, I've been trying to just hand wash those items, just spray a little bit of apple cider vinegar on them and then rinse them and set them out to dry, or dry them off and hang them up, or just use plain soap and water to hand wash dishes whenever I can. So that's just something interesting that I personally have been finding interesting, and I thought that I would share. Now, I know that I said I don't make product on Fridays because I just try to focus on all of those chores that I can't get to throughout the week. That's just our clean house day. And then my kids, once they get all of their chores done for that day, they don't have school either. And then everybody is free to just go off and get to those things that they've been wanting to do throughout the week. But I wanted to practice this recipe that I have been thinking about, and I put together the recipe the other day, and I decided to go ahead and take the written recipe and actually make it and see how it works. I've been wanting to make a hormone balancing deodorant. I had mentioned at the beginning of this video that I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer 10 years ago. And ever since then, I have been doing all of these little micro improvements in our diet, in our hygiene, and in our health to see if I could boost my immune system and live with this issue. And so far, so good. But this is a product that I want to put into the shop, and that's a natural deodorant because I've also had a few customers ask, and I haven't really had much luck with some of the other recipes that I've tried. I also wanted to use some essential oils that I read are good for balancing hormones. So I'm trying a mix of chamomile, geranium, and frankincense. And I've been wearing this for a couple of days now, and I really like it. I've got my daughter trying it with me as well so that she can give me her take on it. But if you're interested in any of my products, I will have a link in the description of this video if you want to go check that out. And hopefully, I will have a really great hormone balancing deodorant up in the shop soon. This is just a single batch marigold and patchouli soap that I had, and I needed to finish it. So I went ahead and did it on this afternoon, and I use a marigold tea for this and a patchouli essential oil. It also has grass-fed beef tallow in it, and it's one of my best sellers. It's such a moisturizing bar of soap. I really love it. It's really good for your face and for your hands. And I will put a link to this soap in the description of this video as well. I just wanted to share it. Again, I know I don't normally do products on Friday, but on this Friday, we were actually really good for our time. So I had time to do a couple of things, and we also have a market coming up in our local area. So I'm trying to do a few extra things each day to get us ready for that market. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly share the end result of that deodorant. I am actually really happy with the consistency. It has kaolin clay in it, so it just makes it feel really soft and it absorbs into the skin really well. I'm really happy with it, so I'm just going to keep testing it out and hopefully I can add it to the shop soon. So here is that kombucha, and in this jar I've got my finished kombucha, and I'm going to go ahead and pour that into a couple of pitchers so that we can serve that with our meal on this night. Once I pour out the finished kombucha, I'm going to go get my fresh chaga tea that I've steeped, make sure all of the sugar is dissolved in there, and then just pour it through a sieve into my jar with my SCOBY. I'm just sure to wipe the outside of my jar just to mitigate any fruit flies. I don't want to attract those things in my kitchen, so I try to keep everything really clean. I don't want to have any sticky residue on the outside of the jar. And then I just cover my jar with a thick napkin and a double, like 2 rubber bands to make sure that I have a nice tight seal. And then I just go put that on my counter until it's nice and bubbly, and then I do the process all over again. So I am just going to end this video with what we had for supper on this night. And we have slowly been moving from eating a diet of sourdough bread and just whole foods. We've always been a whole food ingredient household because we knew that we wanted to attempt to produce most of the food that we ate. And so from the beginning, Geoff and I started our kids out on the foods that we thought that we could produce and grow so that they would just get used to that. But we've also sort of moved from the sourdough to going gluten-free to more recently more grain-free, just because this is how I feel better. I feel like my thyroid is a lot more balanced, my energy is a lot more balanced, and even our kids, our older kids, will comment on how they feel better eating certain ways. And as they get older, they even are making these decisions on their own to eat the way that helps them out. So even my oldest daughter, she goes to horse camp each summer, and even while she's away, I just tell her she can eat whatever the camp has, just have a great time, enjoy yourself. But even she will just be careful about what she eats because she says, well, I don't want to feel unwell while I'm at camp. I want to enjoy being out in the mountains. I want to enjoy riding my horse. So these are slowly also becoming decisions that my kids are making on their own as they get older. So on this night, normally I would have made some kind of hamburger bun for this and maybe some French fries, some home fries, and some homemade ketchup. But even ketchup, I think sometimes I tend to react to tomatoes, and I also react to eggplant. I think the two are in that same nightshade family. So I have wondered if maybe I just get rashes whenever I eat things like that. I believe potatoes are from the nightshade family as well. So we didn't do our homemade ketchup. We didn't do our homemade buns. We just kept it really simple, and we just made some cheeseburgers. I sauteed some onions and then those peppers that I harvested from the greenhouse, and we put the lettuce that I had harvested earlier on our plate as well, and then we had some fermented veggies in the refrigerator, so we pulled those out and added those to the meal. And then my daughter fried some eggs to put on top of the cheeseburgers, just so we made sure that we had enough protein and fat. And we also used things like grass-fed tallow to cook everything, or ghee. That's that large bucket in the back. You'll often see those buckets pop up in my videos so much because we use this ghee and we just buy it in bulk from Costco, and then they're really convenient for harvesting. So I always have them around the homestead because we'll use those to harvest a bunch of carrots or berries when those come into season, or the teas or something like that. But yeah, we go through a lot of ghee and butter and grass-fed tallow, and so that was our supper tonight, and it was just really simple, and it was again a family affair. We all kind of are working together to make this work, and my kids are always hearing me say, "Many hands make light labor," and I used to hear that when I was a kid, and I would brush it off, and I didn't really think about it until I had 8 kids myself, and now I'm constantly saying that many hands make light labor. So anyway, that is the end. I will go ahead and wrap it up. I really appreciate you guys joining us, and I hope that you enjoyed the video.